like
like nail
consistently
biters. Yeah.
every single game is like a nail biter, like it doesn't happen. So yeah, so this is what like an average like race looks like from Formula One, which if you think about it, I mean it's like a huge improvement from what was the average race like 20 years ago. I mean we talk about this all the time, but it's like yeah, so there were a few passes, but at least
Overtakes.
yeah, a
Yeah.
few overtakes, but at least there's tension throughout the race, at least like you're like, ooh, what's gonna happen? Who's gonna do this, that, and that? But in the past, it was always the case that there would just be like 20 seconds between like two drivers, and there was never any tension of any passes or
Yeah.
anything like that.
And yeah, and we can probably talk about some of these things. We can actually get right into it in one of the main topics of the race, just because we're talking about overtakes. But like, obviously, we had the issue with Max Verstappen and the DRS not opening for a couple of laps.
Yeah.
Max Verstappen said that it was like 20 laps, but I don't think he was 20 laps stuck behind George Russell. Um,
It felt long. It felt long to me. I don't know if it was 20 laps, but it did feel long.
uh, but this is like a thing like you were just saying, like DRS didn't exist in Formula One
Hmm.
forever. That's been like a development in the past 12 years of the sport.
Yeah.
That is like it is very effective and doing what it's supposed to do, which is aiding overtaking. But when we started watching Formula One, DRS didn't exist, and you would get things like what you get in Spain, which would be there's the famous Fernando Alonso and Michael Schumacher in Imola. I think
Mhm.
it's in 2005 or 2006, either one of those years, that Alonso just holds Michael Schumacher back for like the last 10 laps of the race. And you just see it, and like there's no DRS at the time. So Michael
Mhm.
Schumacher is clearly faster than Alonso, but Alonso is just like expertly defending. Kind of like George Russell, like knows how to defend. And like all these drivers know how to defend like that,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
before Formula One, the like carts don't have DRS or anything like that. It's just about how skillful you are at defending in these like single seaters.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the drivers can do that, and it is needed in Formula One that like if a car is just faster than you, they should overtake you, because these cars are not as easy to overtake if you don't have like somebody to aid them.
Yeah. Like a little
Um,
boost.
yeah, but but there were people online saying that like, oh, this is a main example of why we no longer need DRS, because look, the
No, come on.
sport it's so exciting to see people like fighting like George Russell and like defending in that aspect.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I don't know. I think that's I think like be careful what you wish for, Like people don't know what they're asking for. Like I know, especially maybe for a lot of the new viewers or of Formula One, not of our show,
Yeah.
but for a lot of the new F1 viewers, like it seems like isn't that like manipulating it? Isn't that like maybe like fixing the race a little bit so that like a car passes another? But that is not the case. That is not the case at all.
Oh, you're saying that like DRS feels like you are artificially creating an overtake.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And then
Uh,
you're saying that that's not the case.
right, exactly. Because I mean, it would perceive like if you're new to the sport, you're like, well, why do they do that? Why can't they just pass each other like normally, like on the track? Like, let's see who the faster car is. But like the thing is that the straights are not long enough for like a car, like the speed difference of a car that's faster than the other is not enough. So like at the end of a straight, a car can pass. So I mean, when that's the case, I mean, you just got to think about it. Like the difference is really small from like 10 to like 15 miles per hour. No, even that seems too much. It's probably like 0 to 10 miles per hour difference if you're just a little bit faster on the streets. You cannot pass on that distance without the aid of something. But the faster car, well, it's faster like in a lot of other places. So like it's important for those faster cars to be able to pass so that we can so that we can get going with the racing. If you're just stuck behind a slower car, then like what's the fun? I mean, like, yeah, like you think like, I mean, it's been a boost, but it's like it's just a more natural way for these cars to race, because otherwise there's no overtake. Otherwise, like there's very little overtakes, there's very little action, and there's a bunch of like traffic all the time, and like but like unnecessary traffic.
Yeah, and then the other thing that you get is that when we used to watch the sport, and like we're talking about 22 years ago when we first started watching it, that was something that DRS didn't exist. And so what you would see often is that like you would get the car in front defends really well for a long period of time, to the point that the car behind starts overheating because they're driving on the dirty air of the car in front. So they're trying to overtake, they can't. They're trying to overtake, they can't. Now the car overheats, so now you need to pull back on purpose a little bit better. Like you pull back, it's like I cannot be so close to the car in front. Now I have to be like 3 to 5 seconds behind, so I have some clean air, so my engine can cool down, so I can try to attack them again. And then I can try to attack them, and then I can't overtake him because it's impossible to overtake.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, now my car overheats. Now it goes back.
Yeah.
And then like over time, they're like, okay, we're never gonna overtake each other, so let's just drive farther back. And then like the races would end, and the first person would end with like 20 seconds ahead of the second driver, and the second driver like 30 seconds ahead of the third driver. And it's like I just watched an entire race and there was no overtakes. Yeah. Nothing happened. I'm just like, so yes, it would be really exciting when you get drivers that could actually overtake under those conditions. Montoya is like the guy that would do it constantly with Michael Schumacher, and that's why like it was so exciting. But that doesn't mean that, oh, like you just need all drivers like that. Oh yeah, because it's so easy, you know. It's not really that easy, and especially with the cars from before, maybe a little bit easier because they were smaller. But the cars right now are so big, and also before the cars were not fully loaded with fuel. They were smaller, nimbler. And then
they would pit for the fuel. Yeah,
they would pit for fuel, so the cars would never be fully fueled up. Therefore, they were even lighter, and they could like manage their cars better and fight each other to try to overtake without the aid of DRS. Now the cars are way heavier, much bigger, and they're fully loaded with fuel. So trying to manage that heavy of a car and try to overtake without DRS, it's nearly impossible. Like, and like you can see really like Max Verstappen, who can arguably, you can say like has the fastest car out there. Arguably, like not definitely.
Well, he's certainly driving the fastest, but yes.
Yeah. And you can say he's the fastest guy out there besides Charles. And he couldn't overtake George Russell. So
who's a much slower car. I mean, maybe not the slowest car, but like the Mercedes are slower this year. I mean, as of right now.
Yeah. So, well, maybe not in this specific race, but anyway.
Yeah. But, no, in any case, I think I've always said it, that if you were to name like the top 5 or like top 10 innovations of Formula One or in Formula One, I would say the DRS is number 1. Like, there's just no question about it. Like it is what the sport needed. You go back and watch it like 20 years ago, it barely feels like a sport. It feels like an activity. When you see it today, it's like action packed. Like, I mean, like races are just full of like overtakes, way more than we ever saw in the past. And it's every single race. Every single race there is like some sort of action, some sort of overtake, some sort of strategy, perhaps. All of these things which you never got before. And it's like yeah, I mean, it changed the sport, but 100% for the better. It's also more natural racing, in my opinion. To me, it feels like, yeah, a little turbo. It's kind of cool, right? a little action, and you're like racing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's another thing that people are saying, like, oh, it was kind of exciting to see that Verstappen, who is in the faster car, didn't have DRS. So maybe Formula One should implement something like what they do in Formula E. Do you know what they do in Formula E?
No, I don't know what they do in Formula E.
Formula E have like this, I don't know if the equivalent to DRS in Formula E, which is like they have an extra 20 extra horsepower on their battery, because Formula E is electric. And then every race they select like I think a random 6 drivers,
Oh,
and then those 6 drivers get an extra 20%, 20 extra horsepower on their car for the race.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, and then you don't know who it is. So it's exciting.
Oh,
um
okay.
and I'm like,
Okay.
yeah, let's not do
Well,
that.
yeah, that okay. So see, now that is not. Well, I don't know. I'm not a viewer. Maybe there's people that enjoy that. Maybe it's more for the fun of it.
Also,
I wouldn't call
and
that
also in
pure
Formula,
racing though.
yeah, and also in Formula E, you know how in Formula One we have like the driver of the day, and you get to vote for that.
Yeah.
You can also vote to give a driver an extra 20%, an extra 20 horsepower on their car
Oh wow.
every lap.
Every lap.
Yeah, so you choose like, oh, this lap I want this guy, and then like they get like a random, like the most voted driver gets like a 20 extra horsepower.
That's insane. What? What the
Like,
hell?
I know, like I
That's such a
understand that,
weird.
like, oh, it like, oh, for the viewer it's fun because you're engaging, but I'm like, what are we racing here? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's actually kind of bizarre. That I don't know what kind of what kind of sport is that? Sorry. What kind of sport like I don't know. That's not pure racing. That's not like I mean again maybe it's more for the entertainment, which maybe other driving categories probably have to
Yeah,
do
they
that
have to
to
entertain their
to
viewers. Yeah.
remain entertaining. Yeah. But yeah, it feels I guess that feels very unnatural to me.